Marc Brittingham, Jermal Shuler, and Rasheed Turner spent 28 years in Pennsylvania prisons for a 1997 murder that left no physical trace. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, and no weapon linked to the crime, while a Philadelphia judge vacated their convictions in early 2026. A recent state Supreme Court ruling has granted the Attorney General the authority to challenge their release. In November 1997, 73-year-old Essie Mae Thomas was killed inside her home on North Judson Street. Her great-nephew, Eric Palmer, discovered her body on a Monday morning after she failed to answer his phone calls. Palmer later told investigators he had to kick the door 3 times before it came off its hinges. The initial investigation produced no forensic leads. The Commonwealth's case eventually relied on 2 elements: the account of a single witness and a time-of-death estimate provided by an assistant medical examiner. Within weeks, police arrested 3 teenagers: Jermal Shuler, Marc Brittingham, and a youth booked under the name Rasheed Smith, later identified as Rasheed Turner. By the time the integrity of these convictions was formally questioned, all 3 men were in their mid-40s. Prosecutors theorized that Essie Mae Thomas was killed during a burglary. A neighbor, Wadia Brown, claimed she saw 3 men exiting the residence that Saturday night. The credibility of this witness was tied to the forensic timeline. Assistant Medical Examiner Bennett Preston testified that Thomas died on Saturday evening, an estimate that provided the necessary corroboration for Brown's account. Without this specific 24-hour window, the prosecution lacked any other evidence. No confessions were recorded, and no items belonging to the victim were recovered from the suspects. In November 1998, a jury found Brittingham, Shuler, and Turner guilty of second-degree murder, burglary, and criminal conspiracy. In Pennsylvania, a second-degree murder conviction carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time of their conviction, Shuler was 18, Brittingham and Turner were 19 and 20. The verdict effectively mandated that they would die in the state prison system. For more than a decade, the legal system treated the case as closed, denying multiple requests for appeals and evidence reevaluation. The effort to review the case involved 4 legal teams over 17 years. The Pennsylvania Innocence Project began a formal review in 2009. In October 2012, the 3 men filed a joint motion for post-conviction DNA testing on evidence recovered from the scene, including blood stains, hair clutched in the victim's hand, and scrapings from her fingernails. The Commonwealth moved to dismiss the motion, arguing it was untimely. However, in 2014, the Superior Court of Pennsylvania affirmed a judge's order to allow the testing. The court noted that the evidence against the men was wholly circumstantial and that the relative sparseness of the state's case suggested a real chance they could prove their innocence. The results of an independent forensic review, commissioned years later by the Conviction Integrity Unit, provided a conclusion that invalidated the Commonwealth's original medical timeline. Independent pathologists concluded that the original time-of-death testimony was scientifically unsustainable. Experts determined that Thomas likely died at least 24 hours later than the time presented to the jury in 1998. When the medical timeline was discredited, the eyewitness account lost its only source of corroboration. District Attorney Larry Krasner later stated the convictions were built on a false premise and that the sole witness was a known liar.
Only witness in the case who actually put these men close to this woman who was murdered is a known liar.
It was further revealed that the witness had been provided with incentives to testify, including being relocated to a different residence. On May 26, 2026, a Philadelphia judge vacated the convictions. Rasheed Turner and Jermal Shuler were released from SCY Phoenix that afternoon. Marc Brittingham remained in custody at SCY Chester for an additional night due to administrative processing delays. On Wednesday morning, Shuler and Turner were waiting at the gates when Brittingham finally walked out. Turner, who had entered prison without ever having a driver's license or a phone, noted the difficulty of adjusting to a world that had moved on during his 28 years of incarceration. He told reporters he wanted to manage the ordinary responsibilities of adulthood, specifically the chance to pay a bill. The legal status of the three men remains unresolved. Shortly before the convictions were vacated, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court granted the state attorney general's office expanded authority to intervene in Philadelphia's post-conviction cases. The attorney general's office is now using this authority to challenge the Thomas case, marking the first time this expanded state power has been tested in court. District Attorney Krasner's office has filed a motion to block the intervention, and defense attorneys argue that further litigation threatens the lives the men are attempting to rebuild. Krasner has stated his office sees no remaining leads in the killing of Essie Mae Thomas and now considers the case cold. The case of Essie Mae Thomas illustrates the impact of a conviction based on flawed forensic estimates. As the jurisdictional battle continues between the district attorney and the attorney general, the final outcome for these three men remains uncertain. If you wish to follow the developments of this legal challenge, subscribe for updates. In the comments, we invite you to discuss the implications of a state government's power to intervene in local cases where a conviction has already been overturned.